So, but then from there, you graduated to working with some iconic Broadway folks. Now, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about your experiences with these folks and their projects and how that shaped your own avenue, your own direction in your creative work?
Sure. I was super lucky. When I finished my studies in New York, a friend of mine by the name of Neda Armian was the personal assistant to Jonathan Demme, who was the Oscar-winning director for Silence of the Lambs. And then they had just finished this film called Philadelphia.
Oh,
Can I tell
so
you a crazy story?
go ahead.
He's going to kill me. I don't even know if he's going to remember. So we were invited to do a play for the commemoration or the celebrations of the opening of the terraces in, the high grounds on Mount Carmel in Haifa in Israel.
Right.
So we were all very young and we went to Haifa for rehearsals. And at the end of our time in Haifa, on our last day, all the actors and I sat on top of Mount Carmel looking out into Mediterranean. And we decided to say a prayer. Rain was sitting next to me and we all said, okay, because we were all petrified. We were young. We thought, okay, we're going to go back to New York. How are we going to, pay for our rent, et cetera, et cetera, all the things that artists go through.
Right.
So anyway, after like this period of just absolute silence and meditation and this beauty of, the gardens and the sea, I looked at him and I said, what did you pray for? He looked at me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Panacea9 by Gloria Y. Today, we will continue our conversation with the wonderful Shidan Majidi. Hi, Shidan. How are you?
You're wonderful. Thank you. It's so good to be with you again. Thank you. I'm well.
Thanks. If you didn't watch the first part of this conversation, I recommend you go back because I give a brief introduction on some of the stuff that Shidan has done. Now, you've worked with some great names in both the film and the theater industry. I'm not going to go over all those names. First of all, I don't remember their names. And second of all, there are too many names to mention. So I just want to refer to the part where you were assisting Ron Neiswarner. Did I say his name right?
You did,
Neiswarner?
Ron Neiswarner, yes.
Okay. He's a Peabody Award winner, but he's also been nominated for Oscars and BAFTA and Primetime Emmys. So, but then from there, you graduated to working with some iconic Broadway folks. Now, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about your experiences with these folks and their projects and how that shaped your own avenue, your own direction in your creative work?
Sure. I was super lucky. When I finished my studies in New York, a friend of mine by the name of Neda Armian was the personal assistant to Jonathan Demme, who was the Oscar-winning director for Silence of the Lambs. And then they had just finished this film called Philadelphia, which starred Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks.
What a film. What an amazing film.
Right. So the film was revolutionary, and Jonathan Demme at that point was, and of course the screenwriter for Philadelphia was Ron Neiswarner. And then Netta said to me that Ron is looking for a research assistant. Would you be interested? And, fresh out of school to work with that caliber of a human being, I jumped to it, got the job. And I think it was maybe 2 years into the job and it was great. We were working on 3 different films that Oprah Winfrey approached Jonathan Demme and said she was really interested in doing a film adaptation of the novel Beloved by Toni Morrison. And Jonathan is, of course, wanted the opportunity to work on this. And he put our projects on hold. So that meant that I was going to be basically jobless for at least a year and a half until Beloved was shot. So then a friend of mine on Broadway said there's a job available at the producer's office of the musical Chicago.
Oh my goodness.
So I radically changed from film and I came to Broadway. And a year into that job, and during that job, I met Mark Ruffalo, who was very young, and many other great actors. So during that job, Bernadette Peters recommended me to Sir Cameron Mackintosh, who is the legendary, iconic producer of all the big British musicals like Cats, Phantom of the Opera, Les Miserables, Miss Saigon, you name it. So I got the job to work for him in his New York office. So I ran the New York office and they put me on a director's path. And I went on to associate direct Miss Saigon, the North American tour. So that was kind of like how I segued from film to theater.
I
If
see.
that answers your question.
Yes, it does. You mentioned Mark Ruffalo. He also, in the last episode, you mentioned something, the Baha'i Center in New York, which I assume because you are a Baha'i, I
Yes.
am too. Our viewers are not necessarily Baha'i.
Sure.
And I've had other Baha'i guests on the podcast, and we've explained, what Baha'i is. Mark Ruffalo spoke quite effectively on the case of the Baha'is in Iran. He had videos recorded which went viral about the atrocities committed by the Islamic regime as far as the Baha'i community was concerned, and especially the education for, the higher education, which Baha'i students are deprived of. Did you have anything to do with him doing that, since you mentioned working with him?
I completely unbeknownst to me, and I don't know if you know, Mark grew up in a Baha'i family.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either. And it was crazy because at one point he brought his family album and he was showing it to me. And please remember, we were both straight out of school back in the day. This was not a famous Mark Ruffalo. In fact, we gave him his kickstart through one of the plays that he did for us back in the day. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I didn't know until after the fact.
Wow. So his parents are Baha'i?
Yes, his
Or
nobody still are. I'm not sure if it's still living, but his dad worked at the National Center in Chicago, maybe still does.
Didn't know
And he
that.
grew up, I had no idea. Neither one of us ever talked about that. So I didn't know until after the fact.
When he did those series, speaking on behalf of Baha'is in Iran, I had no idea he was a Baha'i. I thought, or he was from a Baha'i family.
Yes,
I
yes.
thought he was doing that just because he heard it from or Justin Baldoni or some of the other Baha'is in.
Yes. No, and it was funny because shortly after that, Rain and I got together. And again, this is before Rain became famous. And we did some plays together and we took it to Haifa. But anyway, I digress. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Rainn Wilson came to Toronto when he was working on Star Wars or Star Trek. Which one? Anyway.
Oh my God, I don't know if he's done either one of those.
One of them. No, but it was something to do with that.
Okay.
It was a few years ago, and I met him, and he explained how he started in theater in New York.
Yes, you're in New York.
And how he didn't get the job, and how depressed he got because he didn't get the job. And then he sort of broke away from theater. And then when he started with film again, he became this, Rainn Wilson that we know now.
Can I tell you a crazy story?
Go ahead.
He's going to kill me. I don't even know if he's going to remember. So we were invited to do a play for the commemoration or the celebrations of the opening of the terraces in, the Baha'i grounds on Mount Carmel in Haifa in Israel. Right. So we were all very young and we went to Haifa for rehearsals. And at the end of our time in Haifa, on our last day, all the actors and I sat on top of Mount Carmel looking out into Mediterranean. And we decided to say a prayer. Rain was sitting next to me and we all said, okay, because we were all petrified. We were young. We thought, okay, we're going to go back to New York. How are we going to, pay for our rent, et cetera, et cetera, all the things that artists go through.
Right.
So anyway, after like this period of just absolute silence and meditation and this beauty of, the gardens and the sea, I looked at him and I said, what did you pray for? He looked at me, he goes, fame and fortune. And we both laughed. We both laughed. And oh my God, we came back. In no time, he booked The Office. He became this huge star and the rest is history. Exactly. Simple as that. Fame and fortune.
So anyway, let's get back to our discussion. Now, Miss Saigon, all these, Les Miserables, Cats, all these musicals you've done. So are you also a music major?
Question, no. Absolutely. No.
So
was
how do
petrified.
you associate direct or associate produce or
If only you knew. I was petrified. I love learning. I will throw
okay.
myself, if I'm interested in something, I will learn it. But I was petrified because, you're working for the most successful producer in the history of, theater. And when I was pulled aside by the director of Miss Saigon, of the latest version of Miss Saigon, Mitchell Lemsky, Mitchell said to me, "You're a storyteller. It's no different. Musical is still a story. Focus on the story. I want to recreate Miss Saigon with a very cinematic approach," because he also had a cinema film background. And I was petrified when Mitchell left the production and it became mine for 6 years, I believe. And we toured all over North America, including Canada. Gradually, Gloria, and of course, you have a musical director who focuses on the music. And as the director, you really focus on the story, right? But I found my comfort level, and the actors really appreciated the focus on bringing out the story the way that, Mitchell and I had discussed, and I learned so much from him. So yeah, it was petrifying to begin with, and that's really not my background, and I'm not musically inclined, no.
I want to talk about one of your film projects, or is it a theater project? The Me the Other?
Yes, Me the Other was born out of two things. Me walking on the streets in New York City, the most diverse city on the planet, where people come here because they know they're going to be accepted no matter who they are. Our infamous 2016 election completely transformed the reality of the land. Even in New York City, I was crossing the street one day and I had the right of way, the pedestrian green light, and a car was coming at me. And I realized that he's not going to slam the brakes, but it's my right of way. But I did the New York thing. I did the stubborn New York thing. Instead of running and getting out of the way, I stopped, which was crazy, but I could have been run down. I stopped and I turned around and I pointed the green light that was, for
Yours.
me. He rolled down his window and he started cussing me out loudly. And he said, "Such and such, tourist, go back home." I mean, in New York, I was like, what just happened? But that was the license.
2016 happened,
Yes.
and it's going to get worse now, 2025. But
So
anyway,
that put the fear of God in me, not because I'm afraid for myself, but I was afraid for people who would then become the object of prejudice, the
it would
target.
become the other.
They would become the other. I came home, I prayed. I really, as you said earlier, I believe in God and I believe in the power of prayer. I prayed with all my heart. I said, "Help me, allow me to use my skills, whatever I have, to address this." The next day, I get a call from a dear old friend of mine who was on the faculty of the University of Michigan. Her name is Dr. Shahrzad Mahsoud Afzali. Shahrzad reached out on behalf of her Baha'i community and the University of Michigan. They wanted to create a musical on the different campuses in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that dealt with the issue of unity of humankind. I said, "But how much time do I have?" They said 6 months. I said, "How am I going to create a musical, rehearse? It's just impossible." But, I said, sorry, hung up the phone, and I thought, God, I prayed. This call came in. And I just couldn't let it go. And then this thought came to me that, okay, there's 3 campuses, 3 different colleges in this area, and they all want to participate. And I thought, wow, what if we did a documentary about students on these different campuses who felt like they were others? And let's explore, what does it mean to be an other in this day and age? And let's take stories of ordinary people with different backgrounds. And I don't know if you've
Right.
seen the film, but the students, we have an African American couple. So there's a white and black couple. We have an African from Cameroon who talks about sexual abuse. We cover illnesses, mental illness, DACA. We had a gay and a bisexual couple. We had a trans woman. We had a Pakistani Shia Muslim who was a dentist. So we had, all these different representations of what otherness is on these campuses. And these are a collection of short stories that when you sit through the film and you listen to these individual stories, you see yourself in the other. And that's how otherness allows us, through storytelling and through this intimate knowledge of who a person, a human being is, beyond the stereotypes that we create. We're quick to create a label and a stereotype, box them, and then throw our prejudice at them, right? So it was an opportunity for people to understand who this individual is beyond the label. And then inside of them, they see themselves. So you see me and the other, and that's when we become one. It's a deeply spiritual experience that can really happen when we authentically open ourselves to each other, and we listen to each other's stories. So that became Me the Other, and it was very timely and continues to be very timely and relevant.
Exactly. That's so cool. That's sort of the work. That whole idea is so close to my heart, because if you look at history or even modern day, what's going on in the world and how we're all connected, but we sometimes decide not to be so connected, and we create divides between us because we see someone as the other, not the same as me. So it can't be as good as me, or that there must be something wrong with it. So anyway, God bless you for, doing that kind of work and being in the position to be able to have good viewership, and therefore, a lot of people being enlightened by what they see and what they experience, whether it's on camera or whether it's on stage. Now, this might be a personal question, but have you yourself personally experienced being the other in any special setting or circumstance?
This is a great question, because I usually, after Q&As, because the film constantly gets booked, and I encourage people, it's a great community building exercise to just hold a screening of this film in your communities, in your schools. At the end of every screening, this is the first question I ask the audience: who here has never felt like the other? Hardly ever has a hand been raised, because no matter who you are, and it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, or none of that matters. Everybody feels like an other. We all are constantly seeking a sense of belonging in this world, right?
Right,
We all have
identity.
something that makes us feel like another, right? So
Absolutely.
absolutely. My list goes on and on, but yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And challenge somebody to tell me that they've never felt that.
Well, it's good to say it, and it's good to know it. That way, whatever the work that you do for that purpose, for that cause, is meaningful, because you put some of yourself in the work
Sure.
as well. Well, I hope our viewers, if you live in a community where you want to create a dialogue around the subject of unity and bringing otherness into oneness, maybe you can reach out to Shidan. Can communities reach out to you, Shidan, and get a viewing of the film
They can
organized?
find me on social media, or they can go to metheotherfilm.com, and they can see examples of how communities around the world have used this film to build their communities. Galerian, we live in the most highly polarized times that this planet, I think, has ever seen, and it will continue. So this is the time for these conversations about these issues to come about, because we need to find our common humanity, because we're going so far away from it right now. So I urge you, please use whatever means storytelling for us. Gloria and I, know the power of it. And if this film helps, it's there for you to use as a resource. But get together in your communities and let's start building bridges, not building walls.
Exactly. Bridges, folks, not
Yeah.
walls. Anyway, thank you. I think we're ending our time for this part. Also, again, we will put your link to the crowdfunding for your Climbing My Everest project. Now, we talked briefly about Climbing My Everest in the previous part of this episode. We will talk about that more later. Riza, who is co-producing with you?
He's co-producing, co-directing, and he's the main subject of the film.
Okay, you got that? Co-producing, co-directing, and the main subject of the film. He's actually going to join us in next week's part, and we're going to continue our discussion with Riza on climbing My Everest. Again, that's also a very notable project. So we'll put the link down below in the comments. Take a look and see if you're moved to assist. Thank you so much for being with
Thank
us
you so much.
during this part of the conversation with Shidan Majidi. Shidan's going to stick around, I hope, while Riza will join us. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, but then we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week ahead. Blessings, everyone. Remember, one world, one family. From scattered fragments to global unity, healing our world together.
I was just 800 meters from the summit. I could see the summit, but my oxygen regulator broke off. Had to turn around. I had to make I think it's one of the most difficult decisions of my life. People started dying. Some people died on the rope, and some people made mistakes to overtake. They unclipped themselves from the rope and they wanted to go around and they slipped and they died. So a lot of this, it's the harsh reality of mountain climbing. And that was a big eye opener for me, because I was like, this is not why I came here.